Okay, for this video, we're going to examine classic fantasy versus modern fantasy, and really compare and contrast the two to examine how the genre has evolved as a whole. Now, with classic fantasy, the one we're most familiar with is Lord of the Rings, so that's really what I'm going to pull from here. Classic fantasy was more about taking pre-established ideas and turning them into a new world. We see that with Lord of the Rings pulling from different religions, Norse mythologies, and all this to create this new great fantasy world. Now, of course, this was really the first example of this being done on such a grand scale, and that's why Lord of the Rings is heralded as highly as it is. But with modern fantasy, we really see a lot more of just truly of its own creation type worlds, especially in things like Stormlight Archive, Game of Thrones, but some series still do pull from other things, like Wheel of Time does highly pull from Middle Eastern ideology and religion. Now, what this means for the genre as a whole, does it mean that the modern stuff is more creative? I would say no. Nothing is just more inherently creative. Modern stuff still has influences from the classic. It gets all tangled. There's no use in arguing that kind of semantics. And what I feel is the biggest difference between modern and classic fantasy, and the rest of this video will be about, is characters. The characters in classic fantasy really fell into cliches. Whether it's the Princess Bride, or The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, or Lord of the Rings, we always seem to get these same standard rangers, rogues, thieves, wizards. They always seem to fit into these nice little categories. And Wheel of Time does that quite a bit too, with some exceptions. Now, modern fantasy, we see a lot more of these characters that don't fit into these cliches. They are either not completely good, some of them are more believably, humanly neutral. No one's always good. And the modern day writers are more willing to bend those lines and make their characters more interesting as a whole because they're more human and relatable. And that is where I feel like modern fantasy is really beating classic fantasy. And it makes it more interesting to a wider audience to now have these characters who aren't so predictable, to be honest. Did you ever really think Aragorn wasn't going to want to be the good guy, saving the day, eventual king? No, you knew that was coming. But with modern fantasy, there are these characters that have real conflict, and you don't know where they're going to end up. Whether it's in Wheel of Time, when Rand is going insane and killing innocent people when he's on his own, or in the Stormlight Archive, where Kaladin at the beginning being so beaten down, you don't know where he's going to emerge. There are these more interesting arcs happening in modern day fantasy, and I really think the classics like Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Princess Bride, Lord of the Rings just don't have as interesting of character development, and that is why we are seeing such an explosion of modern day fantasy engaging a wider audience. This is just my opinion. If you disagree, please let me know in the comments down below. I hope you had a great day. Please like and subscribe. Peace.